subject. I'm not very privy to that system or what's going on the academic side. I just see all the kind of struggles that students bring to me, with how they're navigating things, and so I'm in a strange position of trying to understand all of the different pieces that are coming together here to create a student experience, and why there are some students who easily thrive and some students who don't. And there hasn't yet been a kind of proper place for my voice to influence decisions for next year to look at wellness, and maybe just as well, given that I'm still new and kind of finding themes and patterns with what I'm hearing of what's working and what may not be working for a large number of students on campus.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so then what you kind of said may or may not make the next question relevant, because the question I have next is to what extent do you feel safe sharing your thoughts and opinions with the organization? Do you have those opportunities, like to kind of chat with the larger organization at this point?
Only through, right now, the head of student life.
Okay.
So I can share my thoughts and feelings with her, and then I can trust that either she will or won't share those further.
Okay.
That's that's the major outlet. And I really appreciate it and was onboarded by the current head. And so everyone, like, he's very busy. Every once in a while when there's time, I may share 1 or 2 points with him, but that's usually in passing, and we haven't had a lot of time for those meetings this year because it's been, he's in transition. It's been such a busy year for him in passing off his work, to who will be holding it for next year. So, in terms of safety, I haven't always felt safe. I feel like I've made a few missteps in the last term of trying to tackle faculty wellness, which I think was a mistake to come in and try to do, because that takes a lot of rapport building and time to understand the nuances of understanding resources, understanding the different vested interests, understanding the history of workload, and the kind of just the potential triggers of going into that conversation, which I didn't understand early on. And part of what was in my job description was to help tackle faculty wellness because it is such a consistent, huge issue. And I think for me, I would have needed some mentorship and guidance coming in to do this job better, of understanding, okay, even though that's in your job description, it realistically can't happen until potentially next year, and here's the supports and the allies that you'll need to actually have any conversations around it constructively. Because I do feel like anytime I tried early on to bring it to the table as a conversation, it very quickly was met with not a lot of welcoming energy and receptive energy, and even some, like, a little bit of hostility. Of like, let's put that back in the box. It's not the time.
Yeah.
So.
I can only imagine.
Yes.
Just not to completely derail, but how many students do you guys have there? And what?
240.
Okay, all right. So you're just slightly bigger than us. Just so I can put it in my brain, and in perception of kind of where you guys are at. Because we're at like 210 or something like that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you kind of talked about tackling the faculty wellness. Are there other organizational goals that you're kind of tapped into, or should be working on, or trying to work on?
Yeah, I mean, there's one. Well, I think there's two that come to mind readily. One is trying to align our residential curriculum. So we teach the personal social health education. I teach it here, but we have it offered as mandatory for the first years. We also are trying to build an advisory curriculum. And then of course we have TOK. And so then we've been working with complexity models and complexity theory, and having our students have more of an understanding of complexity to look at all of their classes and the kind of the interdisciplinary nature of what they're doing in the IB. So one of the goals, which we haven't had a lot of time to do this year, but is something that's there as an ideal, would be to try to align an advisory curriculum, meaning curriculum that our advisors can be dispensing with the students in a smaller, intimate, safe space, in addition with the personal social health education class that the first years get, in addition with TOK, and kind of looking at ways of thinking and engaging with life around us, to really build a strong educational front for looking at living in community and all of the factors that go into living in community and personal health and wellness, and interpersonal health and wellness in those spaces. So that, I would say, is one initiative that is still taking some time to get off the ground just because of people's different workloads and not necessarily having enough time to prioritize it, which I also have compassion for. The second one is really looking at protocols around mental health, and also working with national committees to understand how we are bringing in students and how we're selecting students who may or may not be in a place to successfully get through this kind of rigorous program and residential setting. And so it's been a question of how do we frame mental health on campus? How do we frame our own mental health program and responsiveness? And how do we look at kind of having a broader, wider movement conversation, which is happening amongst the national committees and the boards and the heads of, okay, what kind of students actually can thrive here? And so even if we want to have our arms wide open for refugee communities or other certain backgrounds, but that we can't actually meet the needs of those students when they come, because they may require different resources given their backgrounds, and if we're not equipped to meet those needs, we may do more harm than good. So how do we really have those conversations early on about who we are ready to onboard as a student that can thrive here, and that we actually have the ability and the resources and the time to support? And that's really hard to predict, but it's a conversation where we're kind of trying to be thoughtful and engage with ourselves, with the national committees, with also parents and students who are incoming.
Okay. And after we're done with the interview, I want to chat with you just a few minutes offline, because there's some very interesting things you're saying. That I came from nuclear power for 10 years. And so
oh my goodness.
the isolation between the UWCs and the similarities in issues they're facing just, blows my mind. But yeah, it's interesting to see.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. So to what extent do you feel that when the organization makes decisions that it reflects the expectations of your team? And how involved do you guys feel in those decisions?
I would say we're not that involved, except for the overlap of the head of student life being in that team. So there's the head of the school, mm-hmm. and then there's a team that's called the AAA, and that team is 3 different individuals whose name all start with A, which is where they get the name from, which I think is cute. But and those individuals are different heads. So it's a head of kind of CAS requirements, head of academics, and a head of student life. And so those 3 individuals, along with the head, really make up the management team. And they are the ones who are making the vast amount of decisions, and with different inputs, depending on whose input they feel that they need. So our residential life team isn't usually solicited for input because one of those heads sits in our team. So she's kind of seen as the mouthpiece for the team, which means that aside from her, we don't have representation generally at other meetings and decision-making meetings. And so there's a lot of just trust there that she's hopefully representing the values of the group, and sharing them. Other than that, I myself have not felt a part of any other really strong decision-making factors on campus. Mm-hmm. Again, I kind of feel like I work on cleanup side right now of like, students have an issue, they need support, they come to me, and if they need further support, I have other resources in our local town that I work with, psychiatrists and clinical psychologists who I refer to when needed, for a smaller number of cases, and I support them where I can. I haven't yet been engaged at the level of, okay, so how do we are there any changes to system and structure that we need to make for next year to try to be preventative in some of these themes that I'm seeing consistently come out with students? And again, that may just be, it's not timely yet. There's not the resources, the manpower. We're in a turnover year, in terms of losing our head for next year and being in an interim situation for a year. So yeah, there's been a lot of concessions of like, and I'm a pretty fast worker. There's things I would love to see get done. And I in my head, I think could be so easy to do if there was just the openness and the willingness. But then there's ways in which I have compassion that there's people who have been here a lot longer than me. And I've kind of got to just take a step back and trust that, they're going at a pace that is sustainable and steady and in the best interest of everybody involved. Okay.
So, can you just talk briefly about like something that you feel that the whole organization was successful at? And I know you feel that you're a little bit on the outside, but, something that you guys just as a whole school or whole organization, like, woo, we were successful here, and how did everybody respond? And
yeah, I mean, I feel like we've been really successful with our project weeks and experiential education weeks that the students have gone on this year. Like, I feel like the faculty have been on board. They've been good facilitators. Our outdoor team and the people who've been holding that have been spot on, and they've brought in some other organizations that we can work with. And I've heard nothing but good reviews from what the students have experienced on these. There's one in the first term and one in the second term. Mm-hmm. I think we've really hit these home this year in terms of reflection, in terms of service opportunities, learning opportunities, integration afterwards.